Coming up on Haynes Garage, safety first. We will show you the top 5 safety tips when working around the shop or in your garage. With Haynes repair manuals, you can do it. Haynes shows you how.
Seeing a small gasoline fire in an open area and being put out by a fire extinguisher seems like no big deal. But that luxury of space and confidence when you're working underneath a vehicle can be a whole nother story if a fire starts. Which brings us to the first tip we can offer you, which is be sure you have a fire extinguisher nearby. But do you even have a fire extinguisher? Does somebody know you're working on the car underneath the car? And do you have a plan for what you'll do to avoid these emergencies? Hi, I'm Steve Ford for Haynes Garage, and in this segment we're going to talk about the top 5 things you need to know to get it right and get it safe working underneath your vehicle. When we talk about safety working underneath a vehicle, there are a lot of concerns that you can research and be sure you learn, but the basic ones ultimately talk about your 5 senses. Your seeing, smell, hear, taste, and touch. You have 10 fingers, 2 eyes, and they don't grow back. So our number 1 choice for what you need to be concerned with working underneath a vehicle is eye safety. Now you can get goggles, safety goggles like these that have high impact plastic lenses. These will protect your eyes to a certain extent. Now if you're grinding metal or you're working with rust and debris and knocking things off the bottom of the car or removing parts, you might want to use a safety shield instead of the goggles to have that additional protection. But if you're working with light duty service, you can put the safety goggles on, again protecting your eyes. But working with paint and other materials and chemicals, not a bad idea to protect your skin as well with a face shield. Now while we're talking about the eyes, we're talking about the face, it's a good time to talk about breathing and air. If you're working around dangerous solvents and chemicals and materials and asbestos is no longer in brake pads anymore, but you know there are things out there you don't want to breathe. The respirator can help you out at that higher level of particulate where they're smaller and you want to have a higher level of filtering. But if you're just working with dust and wanting to be careful, even a basic surgical mask like we've had in the pandemic is going to be helpful to put on while you're underneath the vehicle and you're working with dust and debris. Something to consider. You may not want to be restricted having that on your face the whole time, but just keep in mind breathing, eyes. The next thing we can go with is our hands. Now, as you're probably very familiar, we see different types of work gloves that are in the marketplace. We have our own nitrile type latex gloves that we use at Haynes Garage, but as you would understand, you can buy your own at hardware stores and supply centers that are the nitrile gloves. These are light duty. If you're doing an oil change or just light duty things and maintenance on a vehicle, the nitrile gloves are pretty adequate, like what I have on my hand. But if you're using an impact wrench or a torque wrench, or you're working with heavy duty engine torquing and things where you could skin your knuckles and damage your skin, it's good to have the heavy duty gloves. You want to have the wheel chocks available where you're working at all times whenever you're going underneath a vehicle. The wheel chocks are critical. Now when you're underneath something that weighs 3, 4, 6,000 pounds, you want to be sure you're working with the safety stands after you get the vehicle positioned with your floor jack. The safety stands are what are going to have the vehicle rest on during the time the vehicle is being worked on, and you're underneath. That's the safety tip. So there's some things you need to know about lifting vehicles, and you may be lifting something as heavy as an elephant, and if you're going to be standing underneath it and you're going to be on a creeper like I just was, then you want to be sure that you're lifting it up carefully with the right equipment, and we're going to talk about that right now. But the creepers themselves, a couple of tips real quick. These are not skateboards. Now I know you know that, but if you put this down on the floor of a shop, it becomes a safety hazard. Someone can put their foot on it and it can just slip right away like a banana peel. So the creeper, when it's not being used, has to be stood up, upright or on its side anytime you're not using it. So that's the creeper. Moving into the expensive area, more expensive, are the 3-ton floor jacks that are like the shops have that are commercial. We have the heavy-duty 3-ton like this one over here. We also have the low profile, which has a lower position for the jack, and the trucks typically require the larger jacks. You go to a smaller jack like this one, this is kind of cool because it's only going to hold, it's rated at 1.5 tons. but it breaks down to be portable. You can put it in the trunk of your car pretty easily. You're only going to be able to lift up 1/4 of the vehicle, or maybe 1/2, but it's really meant to be 1/4, 1 corner of the car at a time. But the great thing about this floor jack is that you can pick it up and carry it like a briefcase, so it's kind of cool. Now, let's go over and look at these jacks going underneath the vehicle and talk about lift points. Okay, now at a glance, these floor jacks look very similar, as they should. The big difference, again, as I mentioned earlier, is this smaller one is rated at 1.5 tons, 1.5 tons, where the larger one is a 3-ton jack. What they both have in common is that this larger jack and the smaller jack both have the potential to go for a low profile vehicle that requires a low entry point, because if it's too low, the vehicle will prevent the jack from sliding under it. So these are both low profile jacks. As you can see by the smaller one, it's got one wheel on the front that's very low, as well as the head of the jack. Now, both of these jacks have one thing 100% in common with all other jacks, including a commercial hoist, and that is the contact of the lift point. Now, both of these jacks are going to be slid underneath the vehicle. The 3-ton jack can lift a whole car if it's less than 3 tons, but this 1.5-ton jack, as I mentioned already, is meant to be 1/2 or 1/4 of the car, given that it can only have a 1.5-ton lift, and this car weighs more than 1.5 tons. So what we're going to do is position the jack, regardless of whether it's a smaller one or a larger one. The pad, the face of the jack that contacts the underside of the vehicle, has to be contacting a point that's called a lift point. Okay, underneath the vehicle, we happen to be with a commercial lift where we're lifting on lift points that are critical. They're the strongest structure of the vehicle. We want to go over this because if you're working in your driveway with a floor jack, you want to be sure that you're not just lifting the passenger seat. What do I mean by that? Well, if you look in here, this is metal, but it's sheet metal literally right underneath the passenger seat. So if you put a floor jack in there and the head of the jack came in and pushed here, the only thing you'd be raising is the passenger seat. You want to be sure that you're not pushing up on a soft metal material. You want to be on a hard area like the subframe. This rail right here is part of a larger section of the front of the vehicle that is all steel structure. Now notice, this is steel, but it looks a lot like what's next to it is plastic. So be sure your lift points in any vehicle are very solid surfaces. Every vehicle, every model, every brand has its own particular design, and the lift points vary from vehicle to vehicle. But Mark, this is your vehicle. Mark, our lead technician, has a vehicle up on the lift. This particular vehicle is yours.
Yes,
what do you want the audience to know about lifting a vehicle in principle?
So definitely when you're lifting, you want to make sure that you have because at home you're going to be using a floor jack,
right,
and also jack stands. So you want to know where to put that floor jack head and the jack head. So essentially, what you could do is you could raise it if your vehicle's a little lower.
Like yours.
Right,
yeah,
exactly. So you could actually put the floor jack head in place of this lift arm. You know, we're fortunate enough to have a lift just to show you these
right, but this could be a floor jack.
Yes, so,
okay,
so this could be a floor jack.
and you
so
can lift on this particular seam that's strong enough.
Yeah, the
and,
rocker panel seam, yep.
And it's
Many
steel.
cars have this, yes.
Okay, so lift here first, then what?
Then what you want to do is, this is the subframe underneath here. You want to, like you were saying earlier, you want to look for a structural beam underneath, and this is a good point where you can rest the jack stand head.
And support, and then have and then put your floor jack over here, not as the holding the weight of the vehicle, but as a backup.
Yeah, added
main
safety.
thing, jack stand safety on every vehicle. So you want to look at your shop manual. In our case, we have the Haynes manuals that show lift points on different brands and models. If you don't have access to a manual and you're just in the driveway working, just be sure you're lifting on a subframe or a steel section and not plastic. When you look at all these different pieces, there are many other things that you can buy that are safety related, and there are a lot of other things you can do to be protecting yourself and alert. All of these items are very affordable. Why? Because there's no price too high for your safety working underneath the vehicle. Now, for all of us at Haynes Garage, I'm Steve Ford. We want to encourage you to take on those challenges. If you feel you've got doubt, talk to a technician, maybe have the job given to a shop. But if you feel like you've got the technical competence and you've got the right equipment and you're ready to go underneath your vehicle, follow those main safety tips and more that you discover as you research how to be safe under your vehicle. Now, don't forget, to subscribe to our channel here on YouTube, follow us on Instagram and Facebook, and share your comments with us about your projects. We want to interact with you here at Haynes Garage. Keep it between the rails and have fun with your vehicle.